Hello, beautiful, and welcome to the podcast where we're moving the conversation forward about the choices you make in your daily life. I'm your host, Monica Cox, and I'm here right alongside of you, learning, growing, observing, and trying to make better choices consciously and subconsciously. Together, we're going to become better versions of ourselves and have raw, honest, open conversations about the things that truly affect our lives. And maybe, just maybe, finally get to a place where everyone else's BS doesn't trigger us. To be like, hey, no, we need both. There are, place. We talked about this on you and yours and Joy's episode about cancer, that you use both. You use both the Western and the Eastern holistic medicine. And it was a great combination where if you get so far, which I think is extreme leftism, which is just as scary as extreme rightism, you are only going to get one way and have to live that one way. And even if you kind of wake up and say, okay, this isn't the right way for me, well, you just didn't care enough. You couldn't care enough because you didn't have this awareness about how your genetics were playing into just getting up every day.
Yeah, and it's all of the stressors that we're just getting bombarded with coming at us from all directions too. So it's the genetics and the toxins and the poor food quality and the relationship stressors and so unfortunately, it doesn't seem like any of that is really getting better. But there are pockets of people that are becoming more mindful on how to reverse some of those things, and they become aware of how these things are affecting them and the people they love, and then they proactively seek to change it. And I talk about that in my book, where survival of the fittest has now come to be defined by who can proactively go out of their way to keep themselves healthy and happy and stress levels to a minimum, because that is what kills us. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's being proactive about your health at this point. I guess it would involve some adaptation to go against the mainstream, right? So I guess that would be the adaptation. But yes, being proactive about the things that are not good for us physically or energetically.
Yeah, which is so crazy to think because we see a lot of women getting pushed into this IVF world, and we're sitting there going like, if you don't do anything to help support your cellular health, you are you are increasing the chances of your children dealing with worse issues or issues sooner in life.
100%. Yeah. And I hope that with us continuing to say these same messages over and over, and with more podcasts that we are on and podcast guests that you have on, this will start to become more like almost common sense, just more general knowledge. I hope so. Because
Yeah.
right now, IVF is my only choice, is the general common acknowledgement of what happens if you have any fertility challenges.
Yeah. Or just like, oh, it's a two-party system. It's too big. We can't deal with it. Oh, everything's just too big. It's too hard. And I mean, I think you would probably agree. It is not a walk in the park to live an alternative lifestyle in a society that thinks you are crazy, right?
Especially as a mother. Oh my God. There's like, if I've always said, I wouldn't be so stressed out. Parenting would be easy if I didn't give a shit. If I was fine with feeding my kids whatever was cheap and accessible and letting them just rot away in front of the TV, I wouldn't have to say no all the time. And just the saying the no and the dealing with the attitude that comes along with the no is just so almost defeating sometimes. And so
Yeah.
it's like,
No, I
you'll be
think
thanking me
that's
when you're older.
right. I think that's part of the problem with today's people our age, early 40s and have children. It's just that level of exhaustion of the consistency that you have to put in this day and age. And we live in a community, so we have about 150 homes in our community. And there are boomers that live with elderly boomers that are like, your kids can't play in the street, right? Our street is like a cul-de-sac, dead end. You're supposed to drive 5 miles an hour. And I'm
Mhm.
sitting there looking at them like, you guys bitch about how this generation is always on screens and stuff, but you are contributing to this generation because you're making us feel like our kids can't play on a safe street. Don't play ball in the street, it's dangerous. Don't ride your bike in the street. I'm like, what? This is crazy how you guys have come so far. You probably didn't even know where your kids were, 10 hours of the
Until
day.
dinner time, yeah.
Right? And now my kids can't even play in the street when I'm at home cooking dinner. Like, it's
Oh,
crazy.
so much
Um,
fear.
so much fear, and I do think that impacts people's ability to once again do their own research, they just wanna, after the kids are in bed, zone out and scroll or watch Netflix instead of, at the beginning of this thing, I'm not sure if I'm gonna edit it out, but I was talking about the podcast that RFK was on. It's on Spotify with Joe Rogan. I really highly advise anyone who wants to get to know him more to listen to the podcasts because that's where he's able to really speak what's on his mind. But you said, I don't have 2 hours,
Yeah.
and that's some of our issues, right? For people, they're like, I don't have that time to investigate this person. And I even think too, like, as much as I know it's important, there is still a part of me like, isn't going to make a difference. And that attitude I have to get over of like, okay, no, I am going to donate $20 because I do want to see this through and it will make a ripple of difference. Even if it's not in this election,
Yeah.
we've got to set a precedent that maybe next election, like, hey, look at what he did. And someone else who maybe has his influence or money or whatever can come in and say, no, we can really do this time. We've got so much momentum. Let's keep going. So getting that attitude of like, even if it's just a small thing that you're doing, knowing that it is going to impact, because if we all sit there and go, it doesn't matter, they're just going to keep doing the
Yeah.
two-party system. And I
I
like,
I
go ahead.
remember that with Trump Clinton, there, well, if you don't vote for one, then that's your vote for the other. And it was just all
Mhm.
based out of fear. And I had some people that were very, very mad at me because I voted green. I didn't even really know that much about it, but I knew I didn't want them. And so, like, let me just vote for the underdog, and just stay true to my heart.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's so funny because I voted for someone else too in that election. I want to look them up. Who else was in the election? What was that? 20, no, 2016.
16, yeah, I think so.
Um, and I was having that conversation with my mom. Um, I don't know if I'm going to be able to find his name quickly. Anyways, he was a really good candidate, and maybe he was with Green or Independent, but then he said something, he misspoke
Mhm.
about one of the wars or something, right? And I remember my uncle, like, slating him, and he's like, "He couldn't even, like, state the facts about this," and now,
Look where
like,
we are.
you know
Oh man.
and now I'm just like, God, that guy, what he said probably made sense, or and people just didn't care. And I was saying to my mom, if she didn't want Trump and she didn't want Clinton either. Um, and yeah, and I think the next election too, it was such a tense time that people weren't willing to kind of quote unquote give up their vote,
Mm-hmm. Well,
right?
another thing I want to mention is that politics, especially as we get closer to November, it's just that candidate did this and that candidate doesn't do that and that candidate is a piece of shit and that candidate blah blah blah. Whereas everybody's like, well, why can't they just talk about what the things that they will do and they will change without talking shit about the other candidate? And so far, I haven't seen that. I have seen him, RFK Jr. state, I want to get together and have a
Yeah.
conversation and a debate with Biden and Trump, and we can sit down and we can support each other for the benefit of our country rather than being so divisive. And I think that is so commendable. And he was even, I think it was in the early 70s, he was saying that two candidates from opposite sides did get together and show some support for each other and mutual respect for each other. And that's how he would like things to go back to being. And I think that is so respectable. And that's just, that's not coming from a base of fear.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I know I briefly mentioned before, he dealt with some addiction, who wouldn't with his life. But
Yeah.
in when I saw him, they had this little video and he picked up a book, I'm pretty sure, please don't quote me on this, by Carl Jung. And if
Mhm.
anyone knows who Carl Jung is, he's a very amazing mind, but like basically mindset guy. And you can really feel in Kennedy that he understands kind of the spiritual side. Whether he still is affiliated with a religion, I definitely think he understands that there's no room for hate, there's no room for argument because it doesn't produce anything. And you do get a sense, and I'm just, my fingers are crossed because I will be bitterly disappointed if I do see something from him that is like an attack ad. Right?
Mhm.
And that's why, like, I loved his ad on the Super Bowl because it was just like it was just this kind of nonsense, like, Kennedy, 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 like, thing, and I was just like, 'cause, like you say, the closer we get, and we don't really have the TV on anymore, but I remember, like, all the ads were just attack ads. They weren't about, like you say, what they're gonna be doing, what they wanna do, at least what they want to do. I know I have no false illusions that Kennedy, if he gets into the Oval Office, it's gonna be a different world the very next day, right?
Right. Right.
But I do believe that, or okay, look, I choose to believe that it's not the false hope that Obama gave us. Because I do believe that Obama ran an amazing campaign full of hope.
Yeah.
And when I look back at it now, and you could see it in his face when you kind of like see the photos of the 8 years, uh, he chose to play the system
Mhm.
instead of stand up for what I think in his heart might have truly been there, but he chose differently.
Mhm.
I feel like I'm choosing to believe that Kennedy will try at least to do better because he's already gone after these corporations. He's the guys who has sued all of them already. He's already
Right.
faced them. So I don't feel like he has this like false pretense, I'm gonna change things and then get in and not because he's
Status
scared of,
quo.
right? He's
Right.
not, like you say, he's not running his campaign on their money.
Right. Yeah. And I also like, if he would get in, I also don't have this delusion that, like, I understand that some things aren't going to be that changeable, at least
Mhm.
not that quick. And so, and you know what? That doesn't mean that I'm going to support every single thing that he would do either.
Yeah.
But I still think it is a step in the direction that everybody is wanting, regardless of who they're going to vote for. So many people, especially like, oh, nobody can buy houses anymore, and especially first time home buyers. And he has made post after post after post on his Instagram proposing what he would do and why it is. And frankly, I'm still alive that I'm surprised that he is still alive, because he's pissed off some really powerful people, I have to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
So it will be a lovely miracle, I have to say. But I love what you stated about choosing to believe that it can happen. And even if it's not in this election, we're still starting to turn that tide.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like, when you have a car stuck in the mud, you have to rock it back and forth, and then eventually it keeps rocking a little bit more forward and a little bit more forward until you finally can push it out. And so maybe this is just something that's planting a seed in people's mind,
Yeah.
that of things, that the way that things could be. But I just
Yeah.
hope that people give him a chance and listen to what he actually has to say, because like I was saying over and over again, so many people are bitching about how they want things to be, but they're not listening to RFK, who is saying what he would actually do to help these situations.
Yeah, exactly. And as we've stated in this podcast, is not we are not experts,
Mm-hmm.
but I definitely don't believe that anyone has to be an expert to have a really good mutual beneficial conversation with their friends, with their peers, and really shift the narrative, whether you want to post on social media or whatever, but start talking about these kind of things because it is important. It does have an effect on our lives, and we can really honestly say in our lifetime, the last 4 decades, people not giving a shit and not knowing the facts has led us to where we are in
But they think they
politics.
know the facts. That's the thing.
I
They think they're so knowledgeable.
know. Well, okay, because this is what I always say in my finding fertility space. Radical honesty.
Mm-hmm.
Do you really know? Are you really listening to the other side?
Mm-hmm.
Are you ashamed that actually you are excited about Kennedy, but in your Republican circle, you would never say it?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And just
Right.
get radically honest with yourself. And I think that makes change, these small ripples. And yeah, like before I posted that on my social media, that picture, I was nervous. I was really nervous. And, going back to our original conversation over the text is like, what if people don't like him and everyone thinks you're an anti-vaxxer? I was like, well, then those aren't my people.
Yeah, very
But
true.
that's the
Yeah.
reality, especially in this holistic space that we're in. I'm not against vaccines. I'm not against IVF, but w- what I'm against, like you say, is not having all your facts
Mm-hmm.
and really setting yourself up to fail in so many different ways of life, not just a a negative test or a negative IVF. Really, we know now you've been through a cancer journey. You're a mother. You know all these things. You know how much those little nuggets of true knowledge has helped you navigate to be alive still
Mm-hmm.
and to be happy. And we're both just going to continue to do that because we have the consciousness to go see a post on Instagram and just go, that doesn't sound right.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Even if it is from Kennedy and you're like,
Mhm.
"Nah, that doesn't resonate with me. I'm not here for this one." Right?
Yes, totally. Yeah. So that's my biggest thing, is that if somebody's going to even just see what we talk about in this podcast and get just this knee-jerk reaction of like, oh, and roll their eyes, or I know what they're going to say, or like, check yourself,
Yeah.
because that is your own bias, and that is your own ignorance that is keeping you closed minded to automatically judge without even listening or without even doing your own research. And when people say do their own research, oh, I did my own research, I read the CDC's website. Well, okay, that's one side of the research. But yeah, so I just hope that people can take away from this just to seek out their own information and hear it straight from the source, or read it straight from the person's mouth of them. They're reading an interview is what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah.
um, Rather than just blindly following what their news outlet says, or what their political party says, or what their religion says, or what their best friend or their family says. And you don't have to believe and agree with everything that those organizations tell you to believe. That's kind of like, labeling yourself in so many ways. And I love that I can have friends on both sides. And I have a friend who, she is an African woman that has had homosexual relationships, heterosexual relationships. She's been away from God. She's found God, and she like loves Trump. And we still hang out and get dinner once or twice a month, and it doesn't, she's allowed to have her opinion.
Yeah.
And I'm open, I listen to what she has to say, and I take it in, and I think that's why I call myself an open-minded skeptic. But
Yeah.
if we could all do that and just have the grace to listen to the other side, whether we agree with them or not, without shutting them down and telling them they're wrong, or telling them what you have, your part of it and your beliefs. Then I think that's where we can really start all being on the same page, and benefiting the whole.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree, Jaclyn. Thank you so much for just coming on and talking about this with me. I know that there's a lot of people out there that just don't want to talk about it anymore because it is so divisive. But I wanted to do this podcast to just give people the nudge to say, hey, keep talking, keep making that change. Radical responsibility of how you're showing up in this, and it does matter. It does really matter. Every little thing matters. So once again, Jaclyn's details are down below if you want to connect with her, and have a great week. Thank you so much again for joining us here on Choices. You can go ahead and leave a 5-star review because we're all friends here. But if you really want to move the conversation forward, please connect with us on our social media accounts, which you can find the links below. Have a beautiful week, and we'll see you next time here on Choices.